Can I be heard? Can I be heard? Can I be heard? Can I be heard? Okay, finally, I can be heard. Yesterday, I was rocking out for a good little minute before we realized there was no sound. So, greetings and welcome back once again to those who are tuned into the sound of my voice. You don't know? So, I'm not fully sure, as I said yesterday, not sure if you heard or not. I just came across this information because a lot of this conversation is on the nude feed. The brother Tyrese has been on a number of blogs, and when I see an opportunity to kind of dig a little deeper and gain understanding and something that's in everyone's purview, I tend to do so. So I pray this thing is received in good spirits, as there's no harm or ill intention meant by this particular conversation. Now, I just want to recap because some of the stuff that I said yesterday I realized was cut off. And so this brother has been in the public eye since the late 90s. He sings, he acts in different movies. I haven't really seen all the movies because I'm not a movie watcher, but more than so. You know what I'm saying? No more than so. And but I heard a lot of conversation that he's been bringing to the forefront about intergenerational trauma, more like his particularly family trauma. And I thought it was curious because I began to think that we know that it's cyclical. And so chances are it's coming from somewhere else in his generational line. And so I found that his mother, a book was written about his mother that he had tried to block at one time, but the book is still on Amazon and it is on Google as well. And so I'm going to read through the first few chapters. I haven't committed to reading the entire book, but just the first few chapters are enough to see, or at least shine some light on why he's having the experience. And I think the difficulty in having this experience is that he's having it in the public eye. Right? It's for everybody to see. So in addition to the things that he may have done in his own personal life, right? Because everything is not, oh, it's because my mama did this and my granny did that and my grandpappy did this. No, some of the stuff is because the behavior that we chose to do in our life opened the door to these type of things to come in and confuse us maybe and plague us, right? So anyway, no further ado, I'm going to go into chapter 2. Yesterday, trigger warning, yesterday it got into some stuff, right? That's why I'm like, I don't know if I could commit to the whole thing because I don't know where this book is about to take us. But for the sake of time and argument, let's go ahead and read chapter 2. And I'm not sure if when I switched screens yesterday, it cut it off. So I'm just going to keep it on this screen. And I'll put the link for the book preview in the box so that you can also read it at your own discretion. Michelle, welcome to the conversation. All right. So we're going to go ahead and jump into part 2 of this book. All right, chapter 2. Again, trigger warning. Okay, so last chapter, we're seeing that his mother grew up in an abusive environment of which her father abandoned their family and her mother was an angry drunk. And so Tyrese's storyline is exactly the same thing. His father abandoned his family when he was young, and he grew up with his mother who was an abusive drunk, right? So at least we know of 2 generations where this is their reality. So let's continue. This is the mother whose name is Priscilla in real life. She's picking up the story from the abuses that she endured at the hands of her mother. She goes on to say that she sat on the floor packing boxes to move once again. Oh yeah, and when we left off, the mother, punched her because the mother claimed that the little girl, the 9-year-old, was flirting with her man. So it says that she sat on the floor packing boxes to move once again. Mother didn't pay the rent, so they were being evicted again. This was the fourth time this year. And because they didn't have any money, they were moving in with one of her quote unquote friends. There was 8 of them because she already has like 6 siblings. And so the mother is moving in with someone with more children, including mother. And they were moving into 2-bedroom apartment with one of her so-called friends who has 4 kids of her own. and they would be like sardines packed up in this location, right? So sometimes people look back at these times and be like, oh, these were great times, romanticizing the reality that, all right, romanticizing that reality that people, these were struggle times, right? But let's continue. It was always the same thing with them. If they didn't have enough food to eat, it was the lights or gas being cut off. If that wasn't the case, then they were being evicted. It was as if they lived in a movie that kept repeating over and over, different times, but same situation. So, when people grow up in this, it creates a number of things: a scarcity mindset, a feeling of learned helplessness. This is what I'm hearing being expressed, that no matter what, they always end up in this same precarious situation where they don't feel empowered to help themselves. They don't have the resources to even have space. There's so many people in such a small space, which can create an environment for abuses, create an environment for things that the adults, especially because she told us that her mother would disappear for days at a time, that the adults wouldn't be there to help mitigate, right? So now children are raising children in this generation. So sometimes people go along and say, oh, why don't women want to such and such? Some of the women you talking about are the women, the girls who grew up in this time. And they saw their reality being left and saddled with all the children, while the fathers, in some cases, were there, but then they're not, and all of the pain that they experience. So some women grew up to say, yeah, no, that's a negative. I'm going to go ahead and make sure I have some place to live. So again, people like to romanticize this time based on when she was born. This would have been the 60s. And they saw some things. Let's just say that. I didn't like any of her. No, she didn't like any of her mother's friends. Most of them gave her the creeps because her mother was, according to her assertion or the narrative, a drug user of drugs and alcohol. So the mother's friends, to a certain degree, would be problematic. Okay. It says, I didn't like the way they looked at me or my sisters, and some of them were touchy-feely. So it was giving pedo vibes, right? Anytime that they told mother about something one of her friends did, she never believed them. So now this is a mother, and it doesn't surprise us based on the narrative so far, because the mother is not, she's giving mommy dearest, okay? It says this is what she called her daughters: fast whores that like to flirt, and then she beat or whip them. Again, the abuses, we don't know. We can't just go around assuming. That's why this armchair psychological psychiatrist generations that don't consider all of these, and sometimes not even outliers, right? Don't consider all of these things, jumping to these fast and furious conclusions, make a mess of their lives and other people's lives as well, right? Because this thing has to be assessed holistically. Once I realized, she says, mother wasn't going to do anything about her perverted friends, she decided that she wasn't going to tell her anything else, and that she made it a point to say hidden as often as she could. So as I was reading this, I was like, oh boy, this is about to go downhill real quick, because the author don't even give us any room to get ready for the sharp decline, right? So I'm just warning y'all from right now. Whatever living conditions mother put them in, they learned to make do. They learned to do what they had to survive. All of us, she said, had gotten begging and stealing down to an art. Now, right now, if you put in Tyrese, mother made him pretend to be crazy to get Social Security money. So one would be like, oh my goodness, I can't believe that this is happening. And I was telling my mother, as a social worker, she's like, please, that's happening today. People do that all the time. I'm not saying it's right, but to just act as though, oh, this one Black woman here is doing it. People do it all the time to get whatever they want. But we also see it was a learned behavior. According to Priscilla, which would have been his mother, rest in peace, because she passed, they had gotten begging and stealing down to an art. So when he says that his mother said, go in here and pretend that something is wrong with you so you can get this check, that's what she had to do to survive. And it seems as though she taught her children that as well. Well, at least to the part of pretending something was wrong with you. I wonder how long we'll be in this place, I thought as I continued to pack. Eventually, they got moved and tried to settle into their new living condition. Mother slept on a couch, and they shared a bedroom with her friends' kids. 12, 12, count them, a dozen. 12, 4 times 3, 6 times 2. 12 of them were in one bedroom, and it was very challenging and crowded. Can you imagine 12, I can't even say it, 12 children in one bedroom? Remember, the father, according to the episode 1 or chapter 1, was abusive, beat the mother. Therefore, the mother beat Priscilla, who's telling this story, and he abandoned them essentially, and he did not sustain them financially, although they moved to this city for said thing, to St. Louis. And so now the mother's finding himself catching or moving in with family or friends in this case. So 12 pitney pack up in our one room. We had 3 sets of bunk beds. That still don't make 12. Unless it's 3 on a bed. Well, anyway, 3, 6, 9. No, sir. 3 sets of bunk beds. Sorry. 2 kids slept on each bed, one at the head and one at the foot. I slept in the closet, she says. I loved the closet. It was a place I could go for solitude. It was my private space where I could tune out the world and imagine that I was somewhere else. That's crazy. Sorry. So that's 13, unless she didn't sleep in the bed with somebody, because it's 2 per bed. So it's 4 per bunk. So that would have been 12. So she probably was like, nah, I'm good. I'll take the closet. As usual, mother left me, meaning Priscilla, the little girl, to babysit all, italicized, because the all is lean once again, the kids. Something she did all the time to accentuate, you understand? My older sister, she says, Margaret never had to babysit. And again, Margaret, according to chapter 1, would have been the golden child, okay? She could run the streets and do whatever she wanted, and mother never cared. I could never count on her to help with her own brothers and sisters. I knew she was never going to help with the other kids either. So if his mother experienced this at a young age, chances are by the time she got her own children, based on his narrative of her turning to alcohol, she may have been burnt out. Right? It says here, she was never at home to watch her own kids. On the rare occasion that I got a chance to be a kid, I went outside to watch the neighborhood kids playing in the water from the fire hydrant. It's that summertime. My brothers and young sister and the other kids were already out there having a good time, running and splashing in the water. She says she leaned against the apartment building and watched. There were about 20 or so kids running and jumping in and out of the water that poured out of the hydrant. Sounds of laughter and joy filled the air. Everyone looked like they were having such a fun time. You know what I mean? They probably had Mr. Softy in the background over there selling food, right? And ice cream. But anyway, she says she didn't know what that was like because she hadn't learned how to have fun time yet. And so that would mean this child was robbed of a childhood. Greetings and welcome to those who have just joined us. Shout this out in the comment section. Let us know where you're tuning in from, right? So she didn't have a childhood. Let's continue. Wish I didn't know. It was such a beautiful hot day. The puddles of water on the ground looked like sheets of glass. A rainbow gleamed out of the fire hydrant spout as the water shot out. I smiled and tried to count the beautiful colors I saw in the rainbow. What are you smiling at? Well, it has to be some type of, because it's a middle-aged man. Oh, what are you smiling at? I heard a voice say, startled by the sound of the voice and unaware that someone had walked up to me. I turned to look as the smile quickly left my face. There, standing beside me, was a middle-aged, tall, dark-skinned man with a nappy afro. What a sight, eh? Imagine a little pitting just sitting out there, mind our business, and some middle-aged, tall, dark, skinny man with a nappy afro. I talk to you. I looked up at him and rolled my eyes, and then I turned my attention back to the kids playing. What were you smiling at? The man asked. Again. Nothing, I answered, turning my head back quickly in the direction of the kids playing. We know where this is going. Who knows where this is going? Why aren't you out there playing? It looks like fun. Bye, creepy old man. Can you go somewhere? Because I don't want to, I answered softly. How old are you? The man asked. 11. You're 11 years old? You don't look like you're 11. I didn't make a comment. So, first of all, mister, you're gone too far. Shout out to Michelle calling from the Sunshine State. Yeah, this guy gone too far, right? Because what is it? But keep in mind, mother is not around. She has no protective mechanism. Children raising children. Was this the glory days, everyone? Children raising children. Her father is not present. And there's no one protecting you from predators, right? The big bad wolves that may be lurking. Did you hear that noise? The man asked, looking behind him. What noise? I asked, looking around, straining my ears to hear something. Lady, you're finna chat to stranger. Do not talk to strangers, little girl. It sounds like it's coming from the old wooden shed over there behind the apartment building. I promise you, I read this like a day or two ago. I was like, yo, please don't go to the old wooden shed. Please don't go to the old wooden shed. Okay. The man pointed to a shed a few feet from where we were standing. I bet a dog or cat got stuck inside. So where you no go? Where you are asking little picnic for go for? And he said, let's go see. We can rescue it if it's stuck in there. Trigger warning. Okay. I didn't know for sure if I had heard anything, but I did want the animal to be stuck. I didn't want it to be stuck in the shed either. You hear it? The man asked. There it is again. Come on, I hesitated for a moment, and then she says she followed the man to the shed. The man opened the shed door and stepped inside, holding the door open for her to follow. He walked further inside and looked behind a dusty old shelf near the back of the shed. I don't hear anything. Do you see it? I asked curiously as I stood at the door entrance, she says. The shed had a musty smell and was very dusty. There were 3 windows, one on each wall, that let a moderate amount of light inside. Old tires, tools, furniture covered with sheets were scattered throughout the shed. She coughed from the dust as she walked towards some boxes to see if the animal was behind them. Suddenly, she heard the door close. Startled, she turned in the direction of the door. The man was standing in front of the door, looking at her, unzipping his pants. Her stomach suddenly knotted up and her heart started racing. She was terrified. The man lunged towards her, grabbed her by the arm. She screamed and tried to get loose from his grip, but he twisted her arm and threw her to the floor. Again, be warned, this is right. It just goes right on it. Again, what are we reading? We're reading what is said to be the biography of Tyrese's mother. And this pain, this I read yesterday, would have been carried in his mother before he would have even been conceived. So sometimes we are not only just grieving or feeling the pain of our own life choices, we are grieving and feeling the pain of our ancestors and those immediately who came before us and those who brought us in, right? So she's describing a scene of her being violated as a little girl. She screamed and tried to get loose from his grip, but he twisted her arm and threw her to the floor. He dropped his body on top of hers and covered her mouth with one hand as he pulled his pants off with the other. She struggled and struggled to free herself, but the man was too heavy. Tears rolled down her face as the pain of the man forcing himself inside of her body hurt badly. With every thrust, she felt her breast leave her body until she was completely numb. When the man finished, he lifted himself off her, pulled up his pants. Without even looking at her or saying a word, he walked out of the shed. She lay on the floor in excruciating pain, too scared to move and sobbing hysterically. Blood was all around her on the floor, and everything happened so fast. According to his narrative, his mother did not speak much, and he didn't about whatever was bothering her, right? I could imagine if he saw such a book come out, never even knowing this component about her, it may have been traumatizing. In the forward of the book, the other siblings actually Let me pause right here. The other siblings, the other three siblings, actually wrote pieces in the forward, and he was the only one who spoke uh, ill of the woman who wrote the book, right? Saying she bamboozled the mother, this, that, and the third. So the lady ended up not trying to sue him for defamation of character. Initially, she won, but on an appeal, it was overturned. So she was suing him for $75,000, and by the time it got appealed, it had gone up to 80. Hold on one second, I'm trying to get this thing. It had gone up to 80, like 83,000, and yeah. So that I didn't even know that happened. I found that out in some research, but I kind of want to read what the siblings said, and then I'm gonna continue on. Let me know your thoughts so far. Like, that's a lot. And I don't even know what else the book contains. You know what I mean? I'm like, I don't know about this. It feels like I'm going down the wrong path here. Hold on one second. Let me see. Trying to get what the other siblings said. Okay. So Salandra is Priscilla's daughter. She says, "Wow, this is an inspiring book. It's straight to the point on how things really were, and it's very honest. The book touched me and told me things about my mother that I never knew." This is her daughter. This is one of Tyrese's older sister. "My mother had a lot of issues that she covered up with alcohol, something that a lot of people do because they can't express their feelings. It's really, really a good book. I couldn't put it down. The book goes into depth, telling a story that kept unfolding, a story that unfolded as I read and as I lived it. I experienced several emotions while reading. I got upset, then pissed, then sad, then happy." She says, "God is a forgiving God. I'm proud of my mother for having a relationship with him and making the right choice," because eventually the mother became sober, and she got off of alcohol, and she got, better in that respect. So this is her older daughter who was receptive to the process. And sometimes you usually have one child who doesn't necessarily feel the need to forgive or be receptive or whatever the case may be, and they may reject it. So that was one of her children that was receptive. Another child who was receptive said, "Growing up was hell." This is Tyrone, which is Tyrese's older brother. "My mother was drunk all the time, so the streets raised us. The older we got, the more distance we became with our mother. She never really got to know any of us, but we loved her anyway, and we loved her unconditionally." It's interesting to see the daughter's perspective, acknowledging the mother's pain, also acknowledge, not discounting her own pain, but acknowledging that in this, she can understand how her mother became that way. But the boys tend to be like, "Oh, this is just what happened to me, full stop." Right? It's all how different people process. She never really got to know. He says, "We survived all that hell and managed to come out of it pretty decent human beings." He thanks God for remembering the Gibson family. So he doesn't acknowledge the mother's experience. I don't know if he read the book, the other brother, but he doesn't acknowledge the mother's experience at all, right? Let's continue. And Shante, which is both of the sisters or the daughters and the mother, has passed in recent time. "Life with her mother as an alcoholic was very emotionally draining and tough. You never knew if she was going to have a bad day or good. Her day started with alcohol every day, exclamation. Because of that, her relationship with her mother was strained and distant. As a child, regardless of what card life deals you, you have to try to respect and acknowledge your parents. I never disrespected my mother during her illness, which caused a lot of pain. As a result of being a child of an alcoholic, it caused her to make better choices in life, especially never to drink." So she and her brother Tyrese shared in that never taking or picking up the habit that caused them all the distress. But it's also interesting that this particular daughter didn't acknowledge what was written in the book either. She says she went the opposite direction. She's proud of her mother for taking the steps to recover from her addiction and that she loves her dearly. We can't determine how people are going to deal with the pain that they experience. Even if you try to give certain people an explanation, a reason, try to enlighten them, if they're not open to understand. So far, of the 3 children or 4 children, only one was open to understand, and the others were still kind of focused on the pain that they experienced because of her pain. And let me see here, one more. And this is the son-in-law, which is Priscilla's son-in-law. I have known my mother-in-law, Priscilla, for almost 6 years, and I know that all the words in this book are true. Sir, how you gonna know you only know her 6 years? But let me continue. I was not there for all the 27, but 6 of it was there, and the stories were too. Priscilla has come a long way. Even though the book is going to be out for the world to read, seeing it in person is beyond words. She really was drunk all day, every day. Like, how did she do that? Like, how did your liver, like, all day, every day? When Priscilla started writing the book, I was there to see her write the first page. So now we're having a character witness saying that the book is true, right? She didn't even know if it was going to be a book. She was just writing out her thoughts. I remember her asking me if I thought it would be a good book, and I told her it would be a wonderful book. This is her victory over alcohol and life, to her being restored, and God's glory of another one of his children being saved. So for those who wondered, like, is this really her book? Did she really write it? Was the lady Cynthia Banks a liar? According to the information in the forwards, it was her writing in her book, and this woman helped her to do it. So I just wanted to kind of read that right there. Let me come and see what's going on here in the comment section. Yeah. Let me know what your thoughts so far. Let me take a sip of water here, because this book don't even give you no running time, boy. That thing just throw you straight into the madness. Monisha, welcome. Glad to be back. We taking it nice and easy. We're just doing a quick little preview. So let me just finish this up here. This is chapter 2. A lot is going on. I would ask where the parents are, but we already know. And oh man, it's a lot. Let's continue. So the dude violated her, right? She says she don't know if it was hours or minutes that she lay on the floor before she finally got up to go home. She reached for an old sheet that covered some furniture, ripped it, and used it to clean herself up. Her legs felt like they had no circulation in them, and she wasn't sure if she had even strength to walk. Grabbing her pants that the man had thrown in a nearby corner, she slowly put them back on. Still crying, she made way to the shed door, grabbing hold of anything for support as she walked. Like, who does that? And she peeked around the corner to see if anyone was there. The neighbor's kids were still playing in the hydrant water. She looked around for the man and didn't see him anywhere. She walked home as quickly as her sore and bruised legs could move, crying the entire way. When she got home, her mother was asleep on the floor in the living room. A half-empty glass of wine was nearby on the coffee table. Fortunately, her brothers and sisters and all the other kids, she says fortunately, were still outside. Other than the sounds coming from the television, the apartment was quiet. Still in shock about what just happened, she went to the bathroom and ran some bath water. She stared in the mirror at herself as she undressed to get in the bathtub. Her face was sore where the man had clamped his hand tightly around her mouth to silence her screams. She balled her clothes up and threw them in the bathroom trash can. As limited as her clothes supply was, she didn't want them anymore. She climbed into the tub and sat crying silent tears as the warm water soothed her pain. After a long moment of deep thought and blank stares, she reached for the bath cloth and the dial soap and tried to scrub the scent of the man off of her, the 11-year-old, with nowhere to go, no person to talk to, on top of everything, according to her narrative. You're not even safe in your own space. So those who are supposed to be the protectors in this particular case have become the predators, right? Where does all that pain go if it's not processed? But now that's why we see, to a certain degree, all that pain being pushed back out into the world, pushed back out into social media, because energy is not destroyed, right? So she internalized the pain. She deposited that pain in the lives of her children. They internalized the pain, and now we are experiencing her son's pain, which is his mother's pain, which is her mother's pain, all over social media. right? And we're looking like, wow. Some people are like, I'm glad he has the ability to express himself as a black man. And I'm like, I think it's way deeper than that. I may be wrong, but I think it goes a little bit deeper than just expressing yourself as a black man. This pain, to in her particular case, in this particular instance, came from a black man. So-called, according to her, with the nappy fro. It came from a black man, internalized by a so-called black woman, transferred to another so-called black woman, giving to little melanated black and children, right? And then pushed back out into the world. It's kind of like what Tupac said, the hate you gave, right? It says, when she finished her bath, she put on her pajamas and sat in the closet in her room, because her room was the closet, right? She couldn't stop crying or thinking about what happened. She was glad all the kids were still outside and mother was still asleep. She really needed some quiet and alone time. And as the ordeal kept flashing over and over in her mind, she promised herself that she wouldn't tell anybody about what happened to her. Who would believe her anyway? She cried until she fell asleep. And that's the end of chapter 2. So what did she just experience? A traumatic, painful experience where you lose a sense of well-being, you lose a sense of protection, you lose, because she was robbed. That's what rape is. It's robbery. And so because she was robbed and also felt that she would get no justice, she internalized the pain and it lived inside. And that's kind of how those things work, especially if you don't. She says she resolved herself not to tell anyone, not because it didn't have value or that it didn't matter, but because they wouldn't believe her anyway. Right? So it's interesting to know that the people who lived with her, her children didn't know why she had that pain. And she probably didn't tell them because she practiced not expressing herself, because she probably felt there was no safe space to do so. Thank you for tuning in. For those who have just joined us, thank you, Monisha. Monisha says you have deep insight. Thank you. Thank you. Years and years of reflection, contemplation, and just looking into where there's some universal truths. There's a cord of universal truth that runs through all of our lives. And if we take the time to hear and listen to what's being said and put the pieces of the puzzle together, we could kind of, I don't want to say almost guess, but we could kind of see that there is a pattern. I'm going to open the mic for a little bit because this one is heavy. I don't know why I keep finding myself. I'm supposed to be minding my business, people. I'm supposed to be minding my business, doing my homework. And the more I hear this man speak, and I'm a grown man. I'm like, sir, you ain't got to keep telling us that. You ain't got to keep giving us ID age checks all the time. We are aware. That's what I'm saying. But the more I hear him speak, it's the more, it's like I don't know. There's something in this story that kind of pulled me towards it to kind of look a little bit into it and shed some more light, right? Because, and I put the link in the box for anybody who would like to come up. I'm gonna stay on just where are we at? 35 minutes. I'm gonna stay a little bit on and then I'm a boogie. But I forgot what I was gonna say. Y'all know how it happens sometimes. But it dip on the track and then it jump off of the track. It will come back to me. So let me know your thoughts on this. Were you aware of this book? I promise you, it was just this week that I knew this book existed. I'd be really minding my business. But I was like, huh? There's a book written in 2009? You know? Oh boy. We usually, it's easier to see this type of pattern in people who are more public. Sometimes because they put themselves in a space that you can see them. So much like I was able to see certain things about Bob Marley and see certain things about Marcus Garvey because they were very public. They put themselves in this position so that you can use the information that they're giving you to gain a better understanding, right? I went over Tupac's mother. If you missed that one, that was a while ago. The Diary of a Revolutionary, written by Jasmine Guy. Much like how this book was written, her story was I understood Tupac in a better light. Let's just say his story and his backstory is also very much interesting, considering some of the things that he kept saying was plaguing him. And when you look into his family lineage and you listen to his father, who was a missing piece. That's also what I wanted to talk about. In a lot of these stories, there was a missing piece, and people would like to say, oh, we're just going to blame it on the fact that they were raised by a single mother. Absolutely not. There are missing pieces to the story that when you start to investigate, like that's why I have in the corner is his father next to the book. This is his father. I only saw 2 interviews from him, one that was done like since 2012 and one that was done last year. And his father is Tyrone Gibson Sr. And listening to his father and just reading the first few chapters of her book, I'm starting to understand, okay, this is the backdrop before they were even thought of. This is the backdrop of their life, much like how we had to read Sedella's book and read it in conjunction with other things to see the backdrop of Bob Marley's life. And the backdrop is very important. The backdrop, the scenery, what's going on in and around this time is very important. And most of all, I'm doing it so that we can see that it can be done, and we can do it for ourselves and for our loved ones to get the answers to the questions that we ask or have yet to ask. Sharon says she never heard of this book. I never heard of it either, sis. I think he tried to block it, and not think, he did, because he was trying to discount the book. And then he actually came up with his own book a few years later. It was kind of like the way in which I think it was Roger Steffens, who was it that wrote the book, and they didn't like the way he wrote. I don't know if it wasn't Roger Steffens, it was the other guy, Timothy White, in the Bob Marley story, and they didn't like the book he wrote. So then they wrote their own book. So this is but I don't think he can write the book for his mother's experience. So he then writes a book a few years later, trying to drown out this book. You know what I mean? So you notice that a lot. Like, for instance, in the Esther Anderson, and I'm just going back to further research, in the Esther Anderson documentary, they didn't really like what was coming out. So they made their own documentary, the Marley documentary, to drown out Esther Anderson's documentary. So it's usually a tactic that I'm seeing repeated for people who have more status. If they don't like what's coming out, then they do another works to kind of drown out the voice of the people they don't really want to be heard. I don't know. That's just interesting. So I'll put the link in the box. But again, so far you can check if you're like interested. You can check some of the things. I did one of these many, many years ago on R. Kelly. I read his book, Solar Coaster, which was wild. I did one of these for, as you know, Bob Marley. I did one of these for Marvin Gaye. I don't even think I finished the Marvin Gaye. The Marvin Gaye story, wild. The Marvin Gaye story. I don't know how many people have read the Marvin Gaye. What was the name of the Marvin Gaye book again? But the Marvin Gaye story is wild. Okay. Let me see. I think Divided Soul was the name of Marvin's book. Divided Soul. Okay. And yeah, let's just say his father, he also had an interesting father figure. And he had issues, as we see in later part of his life. And I just want to say, and I'm not really coming for your boy Tyrese, but I heard him talking about the album that he just released, right? Congratulations on your album release. But I listened to one of the songs, speaking of Marvin Gaye, and the intro on the song, I was like, wait a minute, I've heard this drum rhythm section before. So I'm racking my brain. I go back to Marvin, Inner City Blues. I'm like, I hope you got licensed, because this wasn't a sample. I mean, it was the whole drum track, but that was another story for another day. Y'all listen to it for yourself and tell me if I'm bugging, right? Sharon says trauma is prevalent in so many families. Yes, most indeed. It's prevalent, and this is why I keep talking about it. This is not to just kind of like trauma dump or continually bring up uncomfortable things, but the reality is we are not going to be able to honestly move beyond to a healthier space without addressing these things. We see it being done. The millennials and those who come after, we see it being attempted. but it's not going to be successful because of things like this. What you don't know can still come back. Just because you deny it, and just because you block it, and just because you stonewall it, and just because you pretend it doesn't exist, doesn't mean that it won't come back. So much of his father's experience, which I'm going to share in a little bit, much of his father's experience and his mother's experience, Tyrese is experiencing, because he's in the frequency that would attract these experiences to him. So in one of the spaces, I'm gonna play it another time in the interview, his father is saying, oh, he was young and he was just messing around, with Priscilla, which is Tyrese's mother. That he didn't know anything about marriage, right? And so by the time they started having children, he wasn't ready. He was still young. And so in that space, he ends up leaving his family to go do him, to go pursue his music. So music didn't come out of anywhere. The foundation was already laid. The father just didn't reap. He just didn't reap the produce, right? But later on, with Tyrese's first divorce, he says he just married her because he wanted her to stay in the country and he wanted to be able to have access to his daughter. So you may have thought, maybe that was nothing wrong with what I did. I was just doing it for this reason, but it ends up costing you more than you bargained for, right? So that's just one example of how we unknowingly, even if we disagree and we don't like the person because whatever they did, how we unknowingly manifest their experiences. It's a crazy phenomenon, y'all, but it's real. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and wind down. I don't see anybody coming through. So I want to thank everybody for joining us. Thank everybody for tuning in. Leave your thoughts in the comment section below. A few people told me they actually heard of the book and read the book. So I would love to hear your thoughts on it. I ordered it, but I didn't get it in yet. So when I do, I'll decide whether or not, if it's a lot of trauma, if it's trauma all the way down, I'm all the way good. So far, I don't know if they front loaded the trauma, but based on the children's responses that their life was a living hell, I don't know if I got it in me for another trauma session. So we're gonna see. But with that said, everybody have a blessed day, and we'll talk again next time.